Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 14, Episode 37. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being back with us here this Monday, Steelers Nation, as the Pittsburgh Steelers coming off their Week 6 bye. Hopefully everyone enjoyed the time off. I know in some sense the Steelers didn't have the greatest bye week because of what happened in the AFC North around them. Every other team going 3-0 this weekend, but overall, nice to just kind of have a bit of calm after a pretty turbulent and crazy first 5 weeks of the season. Dave, how you doing? Hopefully you had a good weekend as well.
Yeah, I got to watch a lot of football over the weekend, and unfortunately missed the comeback by the Stanford versus Colorado. I said, "Oh, that game's sewed up," and but yeah, I got to watch a lot of college football and obviously a lot of NFL football all day on Sunday there. Looking forward to watching that Monday night game tonight between the Cowboys and the Chargers there. But yeah, I mean, you get a bye week, and if there's a way for a bye week to go bad for a team, it certainly did so for the Steelers with the other three teams in the AFC North all winning. Probably a lot of people thought, the Ravens were probably going to beat the Titans there, and probably 50-50 on what would happen with the Bengals and the Seahawks. But probably not too many people had the Cleveland Browns with P.J. Walker at quarterback upsetting the San Francisco 49ers. But that's why they play the game. That's why I'm a firm believer that there's no such thing as a trap game when it comes to the NFL. Obviously, a couple of injuries in that game for the 49ers, specifically on the offensive side of the ball, certainly didn't help them. And look, say what you will about the Browns, man. That defense is humming right along for sure. So that's going to be something that for at least for the Browns to hang their hat on. Continuing on through the rest of the season here is that Jim Schwartz has got that defense humming.
He has. It's been a dramatic turnaround, and the way that pass rush works and the chaos they create is huge and pivotal, obviously, in that win over the 49ers. This was a crazy week number 6. You got the Jets beating the Eagles. You had the Giants taking the Bills to the wire. Bills coming out on top on the literal last play of the game. The Browns upsetting the 49ers. Let's start with the AFC North. And I was out of town this weekend, so I watched less football than I'm sure you did, but what are your thoughts on the Browns? I think they're a hard team to figure out. Obviously, so much dependent on Deshaun Watson, and don't know his status going forward with that rotator cuff bruise or whatever the exact nature of the injury is. Obviously, as you said, their defense is phenomenal, but I mean, are they a true competitor in the North long term this season?
It feels like they're going to have to win some games a lot like the Steelers. Might have to, have to have some big plays on defense. Look, it'll be interesting. They lost a big piece in Nick Chubb, right? And also lost a starting tackle earlier in the year. From what little I've seen of them, obviously since they lost their right tackle, it looked like Dawan Jones is playing okay over there, but they just don't seem to be as explosive. And I don't think Deshaun Watson obviously has played up to expectations so far. They did make some key plays in some timely moments yesterday, and also seemed to get a little bit of help from the refs in that game against the 49ers as well. So is it sustainable with them? I mean, that defense is good. I mean, if they can force, takeaways at key points and keep the score down, it almost feels like they're another version, like I said, of the Steelers. And it'll be interesting to see when and if Deshaun Watson comes back from, what is it, shoulder, I guess, injury with him, how he plays, and if they're able to get that running game more on track moving forward here. But it does feel like it's still, and I know the Bengals haven't lived up to expectations quite yet on the offensive side of football, but it still feels like the Ravens and the Bengals are in pretty good situations overall, whereas the Steelers and the Browns seem more reliant on the defensive side of football.
Yeah, they're teams that are finding a way to win, finding a way to work, but you question, is this a long-term play? Is this sustainable, or will there be a collapse? I think Baltimore is still the favorite in the AFC North, even knowing that Pittsburgh, is 1-0 against them on the season. I just think the strength of the quarterback play, they're just a better roster overall. It really just comes down to health. They're always dealing with injuries. They were early in the season. They're getting healthier now. And of course, can Lamar Jackson stay healthy down the stretch, getting hurt each of the last 2 years, and that's tanked their season. So I still consider the Ravens the front runners, but I do think the North is still, pretty wide open.
Look, they're the Steelers are 2-0 in the division, right? So you get two more wins in there combined with, we talked the other day with can this team in their final 12 games at least go 6-6? I mean, it feels like they should be able to.
Sure. And if they go just 2-2 in the North, they end 4-2. And if they can do both of those things, you got to at least be in the mix when come week 18, you would have to think.
It would feel like that you'd be, you could need a win and maybe be doing some scoreboard watching at that point there. But, I think the plus thing with the Steelers right now is you're coming off of a bye week. Second, it seems like you're going to get Diontae back and hopefully maybe even Pat Freiermuth, and we'll see about James Daniels. So you could be getting healthy. And then also, once again, you look at this section of games that's coming up for them. The next 5 specifically, I think that we pointed out before you get to Thanksgiving there. I mean, I'll tell you this, though, the Rams, and this is kind of part of what we'll obviously get deeper into the Rams as the week goes on here. They seem to come alive in the second half in that game against the Arizona Cardinals on Sunday there. Now, it was the Arizona Cardinals, but I mean, on both sides of the football, they seem to click a little bit better. So, I obviously don't think this is a gimme game for the Steelers, and we have some historical stuff to talk about that as well too. But I mean, who are the Jacksonville Jaguars right now? The Tennessee Titans look like they are just kind of bumbling their way through their first 5 games of the season.
How was Tannehill, by the way? Do we have an update on his situation?
All I know is he looked like he was in a lot of pain yesterday when he finally left that ball game, and I think he was on crutches after the game, and I think they're concerned about an ankle injury there, and it seems almost definite that he's going to miss some time coming up here. Can he get healthy enough to come back and play against the Steelers in week 9? I think that's the biggest question at this point. And man, Malik Willis taking a lot of, he had what, five pass attempts in that game, and then the other 3 times he was sacked or something crazy like that. His pocket awareness certainly isn't there. He tries to hold on to the football. So, you have to wonder if they get into that next spot here, if Will Levis will come into play with them. And then sure. Once again, game number 4 of the Steelers of these next 5 is against the Packers, and who the heck are they at this point of the season? Then you get into that November 19th game, which will, your next 2, obviously after that, we're only hitting the next 5, but the Browns and Bengals come up at the end of that run.
Yeah, I mean, this thing's going to get really interesting for the Steelers. But since you mentioned it, let's lean into the Ram situation right now with the win over the Cardinals. And Cooper Kupp was doing Cooper Kupp type things, and Josh Dobbs, that Cardinals offense, really limited overall. Again, you probably saw more of the game than I did, but your thoughts on early thoughts on this Rams team, and then talk about what you wrote about this morning for Steelers Depot, the history of Pittsburgh playing Los Angeles Rams-based teams.
Well, I'll tell you this, they seem to get their run game on track in the second half of that game against the Cardinals there. I'll tell you something else that stuck out. Kevin Dotson's not playing too bad for them at right guard over there. He seems a lot more comfortable in that offense. And Cooper Kupp, obviously they didn't have him early in the season. Getting him back, he looks out, and even in the second half of that game, I think they had said in the first half he had some sort of ankle ding or whatnot. You really couldn't tell in the second half of that game. And Puka, they have over there. He's playing well. Obviously, quarterback, Stafford seems to be playing okay over there. They look like a totally different team in the second half of that game. Yeah, I get it. It was the Cardinals, but then you look on the defensive side of the football, and Aaron Donald can wreck your day in a heartbeat. He was doing some things in that game. They looked like they were able to get after the passer. Keller Witherspoon, obviously a former Steelers, seemingly playing pretty well. I haven't gone deep into obviously the tape. The all 22 on that. I will start doing that tonight and all, but this is not going to be a gimme game when it comes to the Rams. I think most notably for the fact that they seem to be able to get their run game on track, and the Steelers have obviously had some problems on the defensive side of football, starting or of stopping the run early on. So I think that will once again be the priority here, and something Mike Tomlin has talked about. You got to stop the run, got to keep them in behind the chains, and that will be a test, I think, early on in this game. And as far as historically goes, yeah, it's history, but it's the kind of things that you look at on bye weeks ahead of West Coast trips. And I think overall the Steelers are, and I think Josh Carney wrote about this last week. Coming off the bye, the Steelers are strong overall. But I think when you look at specifically at the Rams, and you look at the Steelers in Pacific time zone and on the road there. And something that I drilled down, the last time that the Steelers actually played the Rams as the Los Angeles Rams was in 1993. Now, I was 7 years out of high school at the time. I don't even think, were you born yet?
I was a couple months old. May of 93 was when I came into the world, so... Don't remember that game, believe it or not. Not my memory. Back there.
Jerome Bettis' rookie season that year, and the Steelers got shut out against the Rams in that game. Jerome Bettis scored his first NFL touchdown in that game. And how I came across all this to even write about it in the first place is the old, I think, ESPN vignette, if you will, recap of that game overall. And the last graphic they show on that thing, I think, shows that the Steelers were, I think they showed where is it here? I had it up this morning here. I wish I could find it. I think they had 11-1 or something like that for the Steelers against the Rams in Los Angeles. That graphic was actually wrong, and that's what kind of tipped me off to it first and foremost. I thought, I thought the Rams were in Cleveland going way back like that. I'm still trying to find this thing here. I got it. It says the Steelers are. This is at the end of NFL primetime from this game. 27-0 loss to the Rams. The graphic says the Steelers are 0-11-1 versus the Rams in LA. Well, I guess I didn't have Pro Football Reference.
Come on, guys.
Or Stathead back then, because two of those games, obviously the first two in that were the Rams in Cleveland there. So technically, the Steelers at the end of that last game in 1993 were 0-9 at that point versus the Rams in LA. So the Steelers have never won against the Rams as the Los Angeles Rams. Out west, obviously, they have beaten them, obviously, and beat them in the Super Bowl many moons ago and all like that. So there's a trend for you. And to make matters worse, I think only twice in those previous 8 games from last time being shut out there, only twice did they score more than 14 points. Now, obviously, the history is history and all, like trends are trends and all like that. But I found that quite fascinating, especially the Jerome Bettis aspect of it, and that being his rookie season with the Rams in 1993. But not a great trend that the Steelers obviously are looking to break when they go out there on Sunday against the Rams at SoFi Stadium.
Yeah, Dave, and obviously while trends are just trends, and as you said, they're not going to impact what happens today, Pittsburgh has kind of been riding the trends this year in some good and bad ways. You talk about all the trends you look towards for why you thought they would beat the Browns, which all ultimately held true. And when they, beat the Ravens coming off the 20-point losses that you've talked about, which also applied to the Browns game. So we'll see if those trends continue overall. I think to the present day Rams, you can, for your team fungible, take the victory lap on Kyren Williams. I mean, 5th round pick in 2022, and it's become their top back.
Yeah, don't get me started on that.
Let's do it. It's a Monday. We got time to kill.
Coming out on a Monday here. Here's the other trend for you. The Steelers are an impressive 12-4 following the bye under Mike Tomlin. And they look to obviously make that 13-4 in week 7 against the Rams. So, overall, Mike Tomlin's done a great job with this team coming out of bye weeks overall there. So you got kind of two trends working against each other here overall. Yeah, look, I mean, I think Williams, once again, they look to get that Suzanne Summers passed away. Did you see that?
I did last night. Yeah, I think 76, they said.
That was before your time. Three's Company and all like that. John Ritter. Passed away several years ago. He was obviously on that show, and now Suzanne Summers has passed away. That was a popular sitcom back there in I guess the late 70s there. That's sad. Moving forward here, Williams looked good in that running game, and as you mentioned, later round guy there, and once again, I think Kevin Dotson is someone had, and I hadn't seen this. Someone said he's one of the higher rated guards on PFF right now. Did you see that?
I know he was after his first start or two. There was a sample size issue. I don't know where he is coming out of this game, but we can look it up today. I'm betting he's probably ranked relatively high.
Let's see here.
I'm looking 3rd best guard in the NFL. Does that look right to you, Dave? I'm just kind of taking things at a glance.
I'm looking at overall blocking grades. Let's see if offense overall. I've got him of let's see, of the guys that have more than just a handful of snaps. Yeah, they have him as if you eliminate guys like Jenkins and Alec Grady, who've only played 37 and 10 snaps respectively. If you remove the noise out of there, the minimum snap requirement, that would put Kevin Dotson. I don't think they have their grades from this week up yet, so that would have made him as the 3rd best guard or graded guard in the NFL going into this week.
Yeah, I mean, do they not have? They might have today's updated. I don't know how quickly they turn that around. Let's try to see here really quickly if that includes the Cardinals game. No, I think you're right. I'm not seeing the Cardinals game included. So we'll see where it sits post Cardinals game. But it sounded like he's and you talked about it, and there's again I think a variety of things about why Dotson didn't work in Pittsburgh. One of them, to maybe some extent, was him going back to right guard. I know you mentioned that. I was generally not as big on the idea of that's why he was struggling. But there may be something to be said for that. I just think predominantly the scheme in particular that Pat Meyer demands from its offensive lineman didn't really fit Dotson. And so that was one of his larger issues. And I just don't know if there was ever maybe a really super strong relationship there where it just kind of felt like it was always some sort of source of frustration or something going on with Dotson. And it just never really clicked as it should in Pittsburgh.
Could they have had him thinking way too much? And then once again, you go back to his college career where he played specifically on the right side. And although he did when he first cut his teeth with the Steelers, I think it was on the right side there. But you went on to play most of the snaps, I think, at left guard there. Is this just when they got him in over at in LA and moved him back to the right side, probably kept his plate a little limited. And I just wonder if the Steelers and Pat Meyer's system just had him thinking way too much, and obviously also not being as comfortable. It never felt like he got really, really comfortable over there at left guard, right?
I just didn't look comfortable in general, right or left side. I mean, I just don't think it ever felt like he was a great scheme fit. I think Meyer's system is looking, for those guys to be really aggressive again, especially in their pass sets. And I think Dotson as a bigger guy that was stronger, that can kind of more anchor than go forward and attack. I don't think that was great for him. Then you have the penalties, and I just thought mental errors and mistakes, and his game just seemed I said when they dealt him, talented guy. He may do well with the Rams. It just was not going to work well or as good as it needed to be in Pittsburgh. So I'm not necessarily shocked by his, early strong play with the Rams. I just feel like Pittsburgh was not the place for him to succeed.
He feels like a guy that you'd line up at his original space and just go block the guy across from.
Yeah, exactly. Because he's a mauler run blocker. He's big. He's strong. He's not a bad athlete. I mean, there were the physical raw tools are all there for Kevin Dotson, always have been. So kudos to him and kudos to the Rams for doing whatever they're doing to maximize that.
Right. I mean, look, he had a nice turnout on one of those late runs turn in on one of those late runs. So I think he gets the general, obviously run game blocking philosophies on zone and, gap and all like that. You just have to wonder at this point if he was a fish out of the water at left guard, and B, just so many technical things that maybe Pat Meyer maybe tries to focus on that it had him thinking and not playing, and all those things combined, and obviously too when you get down and you obviously had the fan base and people analyzing you, and it's not like they're not analyzing everything in LA, but just kind of being hyper focused. And then he kind of knew the writing was on the wall this past off season with the moves that they made with say Amalo and Herbig, and if that got him down, I bet he was ready for that fresh start.
Yeah, and he knew it was coming. We all knew he was not going to be a Steeler this year, and he admitted it as much. And maybe there's a benefit to playing with a good right tackle in Rob Havenstein, and they've talked up their center, Brian Allen, as a solid, super smart center. So having some pieces and being in a better offense overall, that in a veteran quarterback like Stafford, that does not hurt either.
Right, absolutely. So good on him, man.
Absolutely. All right, Dave, where to right now? You did with the bye week a Steelers salary cap update. Been a little bit since our last check-in on the salary cap situation. So run us through the highlights, the changes, the things that people need to know about Pittsburgh's cap situation.
Yeah, and once again, this is way too early, but it's the things that certain people like. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this for this section of the podcast, but it is a bye week, and we are kind of limited on things to talk about here. But first and foremost, I think it's important to point out that the early projections for the NFL wide salary cap number are $256 million. Now, is that the number? Absolutely not. We won't learn what that number is until a handful of weeks, probably before the start of the 2024 league year in March. But, these projections end up being pretty damn close overall. So 256 million is the early projected number. My projection as far as what the Steelers will carry over in unused salary cap space from 2023 is right around 3 million. Will it be exactly 3 million? No. Will it be a little low? Will it be a little bit high? It should be in the ballpark when it comes to that. The Steelers, I think, currently now have 40 players under contract for 2024. That will obviously shuffle one way or another by a couple of players by the time we get to the off season there. And within that, the best way that I have learned to kind of do a mock, if you will, what this team will look like once their initial rule of 51, once you build out their roster to 51, because obviously the league works off of the rule of 51 once you get to the start of the new league year in March, is to put in as placeholders players with second-year players. And what that helps you do is offset, helps you absorb however many kind of reserve future players that you'll be adding to the roster, along with your draft class and whatever kind of bonuses are in that. So once again, the best way I have found to build out, to kind of mock this thing, is to take, essentially, this team has 40 players under contract, and then add in 11 players with second year base salaries, and that kind of provides enough buffer that I feel gets you in the ballpark there. Now, currently, this team has a little over $300,000 in dead money already on the books for 2024. You put all that together, and then you add in the mandated workout bonus charge placeholder amount, which next year is a little bit over 900,000 there. You put all that together, and if you want kind of an honest mock look ahead projected at where this team might sit once they build out their rule of 51 initially, would put them roughly 1.4 million over a $256 million cap number. Now, before everybody freaks out about that, and then look, you know how I build these things out. I try to project your future salary cap expenses moving on into the rest of the season, like adding a 52nd and 53rd player, accommodating for a full practice squad, putting $2 million going towards replacements because of maybe injured reserve players, and then lowering this year. The Steelers went into this year with, what did we say, about $6.3 million in available, slush fund. We need this much amount available to start the season with in salary cap space. I bumped that up to last year. I worked off of a number of 9 million as a placeholder number there. They actually went into the season with around 6.3 million this year, so I'm going to bump that up to or lower it from 9 to 7 million this year. You factor in all those way late in the season projected future salary caps charges, you could realistically look at this team and say, well, there's 16 million over for 2024. And once again, I cautioned before everybody freaks out about that. I think you have to look at, there are several elephants in the room that will need to be addressed, and several of those elephants have March roster bonuses due. You look at guys like Larry Ogunjobi, Chikwama Okorafor, Mason Cole, Patrick Peterson. All four of those players have March roster bonuses due, terminating the contracts of all four before paying the respective March roster bonuses would clear a whopping 26.56 million in salary cap space. there prior to roster displacement of your top 51 there. So, and that number could be as high as 30.1 million if you deem that you terminated the contract of Larry Ogunjobi and put a June 1st designation on him. So it's certainly pliable. Now look, is it going to be all four of those guys terminated? It's hard to answer that question as we sit here at the bye week, but some of those four aren't going to, I'll tell you this, some of those four aren't going to be there. And, depending on how Larry Ogunjobi plays the rest of this season and Chukwuma Okorafor, I don't think anybody should be shocked if we got to March and all four of those guys were terminated.
Well, let's walk through it. There's four of them there. We'll start name by name. And I know we're in the middle of the season. No determinations made now. Things all subject to change. But if you had to guess right now, does Larry Ogunjobi get his roster bonus picked up?
Ooh, that's a tough one, especially coming off of a game where he had that punch out and all like that.
I think they pick it up. I at this point, even though the sacks haven't been there, the production has been there enough, and the D-line situation doesn't have incredible depth and guys to replace him. I think they pick it up right now pretty easily.
And I think you best walked it through. Cam Hayward, another year older. Who your depth behind guys right now like Cam Hayward, Larry Ogunjobi, Keanu Benton. Who else is after that?
Yeah, but they did a 3-year deal with Ogunjobi, right?
Right.
For them to not go into year 2 means that year 1 has to be really bad. And Ogunjobi has not been bad this year. So I think this is a pretty easy decision.
Right. As long as he stays healthy and he plays at least the way he's played right now through the first 5 games, I'd be more inclined to say yes, he will be part of this 2024 team.
Let's move
and plus, once again, you're talking about a guy that you invested. Look, you could get out of this deal and just call it a 1 year, whatever we said it was, $14 million overall. But you obviously don't go into contracts thinking that was going to be the case. So to me, you would have to lose a lot of confidence in Larry Ogunjobi to part ways with him after just one season. So I'm with you. I'd be, but once again, we are 5 games into this thing, and a lot can happen. I just wanted to point out that he is one of those guys with the roster bonuses there that could we get to a place in these final 12 games where we're thinking, oh man, I don't know about that,
Understood. Yeah. Again, we are still early into this thing, and this is all subject to change. And there would also be a dead money associated with Ogunjobi if you were to not pick up that roster bonus, correct?
Oh yeah. Look, without a doubt. And then you'd have to make a decision too to help alleviate some of that. Do you make him a June 1st casualty? In other words, you cut him before you pay him that March roster bonus, but you'd still have to carry the rest of his full base salary up until June 1st. So you could get some of that remaining proration carried over to 2025 as dead money.
Gotcha. Again, there's a cap savings there, but Pittsburgh doesn't want to start stacking up a ton of dead money unless they feel like they have to. So again, I think Ogunjobi in the moment right now, asking that question, he stays. Okay, Chukwuma Okorafor. This one might be a little bit more debatable to me, but what do you think, Dave?
It doesn't feel like right now. It feels like they might could part ways with him.
I'm kind of on the fence. They've always seemed to like Okorafor maybe a bit more than we have, giving him that 3-year deal. How much is the roster bonus on Okorafor?
It's like in his the 3 million variety, I think.
Okay. If I had to guess, and I'm not as confident in this one.
4 million with him.
Okay. I'm not as confident in this one as I am Ogunjobi. I think they pick it up.
It's not like his overall, not that you should measure a player by his cap charge and cap charge alone. But when you look at what his base salary is supposed to be, $4.75 million. And then, you're talking about paying a tackle $8.75 million in 2024. Now, either he's worth it or he's not, but it's not like it's an astronomical amount to pay for a starting right tackle. It's just, is he worthy to start? If if you have any doubts about him being your starting right tackle in 2024, then you obviously look at it.
Sure,
and there's 12 games remaining.
Right. I just think given other team needs, given that it's not a super high cost overall, this team knowing they're going to have to address center as one of their top priorities, they could still draft a right tackle in, the second, third round, and then, see where things go midseason. And then for 2025, all that combined, and Okorafor has not been bad either. He's always just kind of been, I think, a serviceable, competent right tackle for the NFL. I think they pick it up.
There are people right now, listeners to this podcast, saying cut him.
Sure, and I get it,
and that's understandable. So I don't think it's a slam dunk either way. I think it's kind of a to be determined situation with him.
I'm with you. Okay, Patrick Peterson. This one I think is maybe the most interesting one of all. Dave, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't. From how he's played so far and the way this thing seems to be trending. I got a funny feeling this might be one and done.
I think it's the most likely name of the three we've mentioned so far. I still think Mike Tomlin loves the dude, and if they can find a way to not have him be an outside corner really at all next season and really truly be a slot guy and dime guy, rotational guy, I think Tomlin wants to keep him around. So I'm going to lean towards they pick it up.
Okay. I will lean towards them not.
Okay. I mean, his play on the outside, I think, has been, poor, but there's got to be a recognition this guy cannot continue to be an outside corner.
Okay.
So,
and he is scheduled to earn $3.85 million base and another $3 million with that roster bonus there. So you talk about $6.85 million for a guy that you say that you think can't be an every down corner.
Yeah, I'm not saying that I would do it. I'm just going from their. I'm trying to get into Tomlin's head right now and his perspective, and I think they just love Peterson. There are some of the intangibles he brings in terms of mentorship, leadership, good for Porter Jr. I try to factor that in as well.
And plus, who's going to start on the outside opposite Joey? Assuming we can ever get Joey Porter Jr. on the field full time.
Get Porter starting first.
And obviously you got a lot of questions with can Corey Trice Jr. come back from this another injury and all like that? You got questions there, and just the depth chart behind it really is non-existent overall.
Another reason to keep Peterson, because Wallace a free agent, Pierre's a free agent, correct? I mean, there's not. Trice is going to be a sophomore guy coming off what we believe is a torn ACL. You can't just assume he's going to be a plug and play starting corner, obviously. So all the more reason to hold on to Peterson.
Okay.
And then finally, center Mason Cole. We did mention this on Friday. I have a video up on the site today that talks about Cole's struggles. Going into the year, I would have, fairly safely assumed, Cole will play out his contract in Pittsburgh. Right now, Dave, I think that's one they don't pick up. His play, for whatever reason, has been really poor.
Yeah, $1.5 million roster bonus in March as well, set to earn a base salary in 2024, $3.25 million there. So he would really have to, in my opinion, turn it around starting against the Rams in week 7. But the bad thing about it, once again, is we talked about backup center all throughout the offseason here, and obviously Spencer Anderson, what's going to happen there? He had some college experience at center. You got James Daniels, who obviously has NFL experience at center that hasn't played it in quite a while. And then Nate Herbig, who, is, I guess, technically your backup center now, who doesn't have a lot. So, and this would obviously take place. You'd have to make a decision on Cole before the draft.
Mm-hmm. But what date is that due? The bonus? Or the roster bonus?
It's like, what day did I tell you it was on him? Like the 21st or something?
So that'll be after free agency begins, correct?
Yeah, all of them are either like 3, 5, or 7 days, I think, after the start of the new league year.
Okay. So in theory, you could go, you're going to explore, you're going to see what veteran centers are out there. If you want to get somebody on a relatively cheap deal, 2-year type of contract, like a Herbig type deal to compete, to be that veteran option. And then you go into the draft looking for that long-term solution.
Right.
That's my thought there. But
well,
yeah,
you've got, of these 4 guys that you talked about and talking about clearing, and this team's going to have to clear some cap space somehow, some way, right? I mean, we've come to that conclusion, at least in this exercise of this look ahead for 2024 for the salary cap, is they're going to have to clear some cap space. And, when you look at potential restructures and everybody cringes, look, I think they did a fantastic job this past offseason to get them in a spot where they were able to leave the contract of TJ Watt alone. All right. Sure,
but they probably go back to the bank of Watt for 2024?
I don't think so. Far enough now into his contract now that I don't think that you do. In fact, you're probably closer to the conversations of, do we have to get this guy signed to another deal here pretty soon?
Okay, that's interesting. So are there any logical restructure? There you go. The other outside linebacker bank.
Right. Alex Highsmith, on the heels of him signing that big deal this past offseason, in my opinion, has become the primary potential candidate for restructuring next offseason if they have to go down that road. And
what's his base salary next year?
His base salary is $10.733 million.
So they could clear a lot of space by obviously taking that down.
7.258.
Yeah, that's a good chunk there. So feel like, again, we're pretty early, but high chance I think that's going to happen in 2024.
Went into last offseason. If you circle back to about the time that you guys went to the Senior Bowl and all, and I did the solo cap projection and all like that, it felt like TJ Watt, to some degree at that point, was going to need a restructure of some type, whether it be full or whether it be even a half type restructure. In fact, I mean, I would have been in the category of betting you that some sort of restructure at that point in time would have occurred. And then obviously you ended up cutting Millette,
Jack,
Jack, seemed like they had cut somebody else too. Didn't they have another corner that they cut? We knew
Kello. They could have cut a Kello.
Yeah, Kello was the other one. There we knew they were going to cut William Jackson coming out of the offseason.
Oh yeah,
there. But I mean, we already knew that at the time there. But enough things happened from that point in time.
Sure.
That ended up, and even down to the final kind of week of this past offseason,
we were still talking about it.
It all came down to how much cushion did they want in free salary cap space, in my opinion. And I had budgeted them at being 9, and they ended up 6.3. Well, there's your difference in doing a partial restructure on TJ Watt there. So I am not ready to sit here and slam dunk either way that they will or won't restructure the contract of Alex Highsmith. It is, however, an option. And that's the key thing I think that needs to be noted. Now, if you're hedging toward keeping 3 of these 4 players with March roster bonuses at this point, then there are going to have to be other ways in addition to restructuring the contract of Alex Highsmith that I think that you have to explore. And this is the next group of elephants in the room, if you will, that I think that you need to look at. And leading the list of the next elephants in the room is Allen Robinson.
Yeah, I was just going to go there and say that's your kind of William Jackson player. I mean, obviously he's giving you some on-field value that Jackson did not, but a guy with a big base salary next year that there's no way he's going to play at that number.
There, $10 million is his base salary right now. And unless you go to him and say, look, Alan, we love you. We like the leadership that you bring to the room, all like that. But you got to lower that down to $3 million.
Right. So you're going to clear one way or another a ton of cap space by doing something with Robinson's contract. Most likely just releasing him is my guess.
Right. And then some smaller, less weighty elephants in the room past Allen Robinson would be, I think, two of your inside linebackers that you signed this past offseason, and Cole Holcomb and Landon Roberts. And then when you look at the whole Holcomb situation, it's almost kind of a mirrored situation of the Patrick Peterson, right? To some degree.
In what sense exactly?
And maybe more along the lines of like an Ogunjobi. What do you have behind him?
Mm-hmm.
Has he played well enough? He is one of those that, while I think you could put him in the safe category right now, there are 12 games remaining.
Right, but I think like you said, Ogunjobi's a better comparison to Peterson. 3-year deal, and unless you're playing really, really poorly in year 1, then you're going to stay for at least year 2. And Holcomb has played well enough to stay for year 2.
All right. And then Landon Roberts is not like you save a lot of money, but it might be something that you have to look at either way. You don't have to make a decision with him right away in March, but you have the rest of the summer to look at that $3.5 million base salary for him and decide what you want to do with him.
Sure, that's possible. It depends on Mark Robinson. Does Quan Alexander re-sign or not? Those things have to be considered. So Roberts is a little up in the air right now.
I guess kind of moving on past that, and I didn't list these in my post there, but two of your safeties in Diontae Casey and Keanu Neal, there's not a lot of money to save overall there. $3 million base salary on Casey, and Keanu Neal's due 2.250. So once again, I didn't feel those guys were worthy to put in the post because of their base salaries being more on the lower side like that. I kind of used the cutoff of a Landon Roberts at $3.5 million when kind of talking about, guys that, could potentially save it, because you have the whole displacement rule of 51, roster displacement and all like that, that trims into the actual amount of cap spaces saved as well too. So, I mean, look, circle this thing back. If you're listening to this right now and if you're more to Alex's side of thinking, those 4 guys you guys mentioned, Ogunjobi, Okorafor, Mason Cole, and Patrick Peterson, I could see 3 of those guys, the most expensive guys, staying. Then you're going to have to figure out different ways to get creative to free up some cap space, especially as not to necessarily get you to the start of the new league year, especially if you cut a guy like Allen Robinson and all like that. But as the offseason progresses, you still have to, even though, those other charges, which total out to be, $7 million for in season replacement fund, $2 million for, injured reserve, whatever happens there, $4 million for practice squad, and $1.5 million for a 52nd and 53rd player. You're still talking about $14.5 million.
Sure. No, I understand that wholeheartedly. I think it's also interesting, and we visited this, I think, right before the year began, or right as the year began, the pending unrestricted free agency class for the Steelers. And it's looking less impressive than it did at the start of the season, Dave, and it didn't look terribly impressive then. Levi Wallace, Montrevious Adams, Gunnar Olszewski, Miles Killebrew, Marcus Golden, Quan Alexander, Desmond King, James Pierre, Shandon Sullivan, Armand Watts, Mason Rudolph, Miles Boykin, and Elijah Riley was the list you had released at the start of the season. Wallace was kind of your big name, and I don't think he's going to get big money this offseason. Adams has played well and could stick around. You got some veteran guys like Gold and Alexander who may return, but they were playing cheap this year. You're not spending much on your pending unrestricted free agency class.
Right. Any of those guys that you on that list that you if they re-sign at this point, you might want to think about bringing Miles Killebrew back at $2 million. $2 million.
Yeah, you're going to bring some of those guys back, but no one's breaking your bank, obviously.
Right. None of them are going to absolutely crush you as far as that, if any at all, are re-signed there. So, I mean that's not the issue here. But what are you going to be able to attack in outside free agency, and are you back into? And you would have to think that that's going to be the case. It's going to be one of those budget free agent, outside free agent kind of, 2 or 3 of those middling guys, and then a whole bunch of veteran benefit contracts, the same cycle.
Mm-hmm. Right. That may be the case. So obviously that's still all the way out.
That gets me back into my rants of, is that enough to keep from, and we'll see how the rest of the season plays out, but is that playing a part in this team being kind of a middling team?
In terms of the inaction in free agency, or the low contracts in free agency?
Just they never go all in on a top player,
Mm-hmm.
a top market player, and haven't for years. It's just not what they do.
They've never signed
right.
a $80 million contract or top of the market contract.
Right. But I mean, do they need to start considering that?
I don't know if that's the solution,
or do
honestly.
They need to do a better job of scouting out some of these more middling guys, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to see how the rest of the season goes and kind of take inventory where this team ends up. I mean, heck, again, this time at the bye a year ago, we were talking about they were 2-6. They looked the worst team in football, and they kind of figure things out the other side. Will they do that again? I don't know, but I'll let the season kind of play out before we talk about maybe what the best course is for the offseason.
All right, here's a recap of the Steelers 2000, at least initial 2024 cap situation here. It probably doesn't look great on paper overall, but there are, as usual, movable, pliable areas within that. And I think most of that centers around the 4 names that really 5 names, I guess, because Allen Robinson deserves, even though he's not, doesn't have a roster bonus. I think he's a guy that you really have to look hard at as a potential elephant in the room. So those main elephants would be Larry Ogunjobi, Chukwuma Okorafor, Mason Cole, Patrick Peterson, and Allen Robinson II there. However, if you end up retaining 3 of those 5, then I think that this team, I think the restructure of Alex Highsmith does come into play at that point, and they'll be able to, as usual, move around this. It's not a concern either way, but how they go about maneuvering around it, and the impact it has on the kind of outside unrestricted free agent they go after.
Sure.
Would matter.
But even if you were to cut an Ogunjobi or a Peterson or a Okorafor, there's going to be a cost to replace those guys, unless you're going to count on just rookies to do it, which is a tricky thing to do that doesn't typically happen in Pittsburgh.
But if you go outside and add a couple of free agents within that, the first year cap charge of those guys, assuming they're 2 or 3 year signings, would obviously be lower than what these guys' salary cap charges are set to be.
Sure, but if your philosophy is they need to stop signing kind of these mid-tier free agents, and you're just signing the mid-tier free agent to replace the mid-tier free agent that you signed with, Peterson,
that gets
Ogunjobi.
Back into my argument of doing a better job of evaluating these guys.
Sure, but what are they missing? Is it there's a whole, we can go down a rabbit hole a different time probably about how to evaluate better, but
sure.
If it's the same people evaluating, of course you always want to evaluate better. So do you need new people to evaluate, or again, that's a whole different conversation, I'm sure.
Yeah, and that's way too early to have at this time. But the main thing I wanted to get across here is that you have the ability, just in straight terminations alone on guys like Ogunjobi, Okorafor, Cole, and Peterson, those 4 alone, of freeing up $26.5 million prior to roster displacement, and then even as much as $30.1 million if you need to cut Ogunjobi and put a post June 1st designation on him. So the money's there to be created, assuming those guys aren't deemed worthy of holding on to.
Right. And it's worth watching their play the rest of the season because things can change. I think 3 of the 4 stay, but by January, my opinion may very well change. And so it's something to watch in addition to the actual legitimate unrestricted free agents. These guys are almost in some sense, playing for the jobs over here.
All right. So don't freak. If you're listening to this, don't freak out about it. I think, and once again, one of these takeaways should be that we need to watch those 4 guys specifically because, they have March roster bonuses involved, and that would be the time to cut them in Larry Ogunjobi, Okorafor, Cole, and Patrick Peterson.
Become a very important window.
All 4 of those guys will not be retained past the roster bonuses.
Besides Cole, who do you think the most likely to not be retained is of the other
Peterson.
3? Okay, that's fair.
And then Okorafor, and then the least likely to be cut probably at this point in time would be Ogunjobi.
I would rank them the same way. I'm with you. I just feel more strongly about the odds of a Peterson and probably an Okorafor being kept.
And then Allen Robinson, you have to do something there.
He's gone.
Either cut him or get him to lower it down to like $3 million.
He's done his job well, but it's not a good enough. His role is not so valuable to pay him that kind of money.
I wonder, everybody bookmark this section of the podcast because it's going to be interesting to see how the conversation changes, if any, come right after the season ends.
Sure. And somebody could get hurt, and that may change the whole equation as well. So that's always the fly in the ointment. All right, Dave. I think the last thing I wanted to get to today was an article I wrote this morning, and I was out of town this weekend, and I woke up on, I guess it would have been Sunday, and I saw this comment from Chris Long, who I do like. I enjoy his podcast, but it just burned me up. And the second I read it, I said, I got to write about this thing for Monday. And so he's not the only one, but he's the latest to talk about how George Pickens is not getting the football enough, not being targeted enough. Mike Florio has said that endlessly this season to the point where he, insinuated that Pittsburgh was intentionally not throwing him the football so they wouldn't have to pay him down the line, which is a crazy comment on so many levels. But others have said it as well. And I just don't see the evidence there. He did some targeted 40 times this year. That's 8 per game. It's way up from his rookie year. The target share is high. It's comparable to a lot of receivers who are in his target range. When you factor in that Pittsburgh has not had the ball much, not thrown a ton, the fact that Pickens has been doubled and taken away, and that he's not a Justin Jefferson, Devontae Adams, elite level route runner that's going to get open in all these really super creative ways. His route running has certainly gotten better. He's a more well-rounded receiver. That's been important. It's one reason why you've seen his targets go up. But I just don't see the issue of this offense is that Pickens has not been targeted enough and not gotten the ball enough. I think he has.
I think he has as well, too. I think that moving forward to this with Diontae coming back is, can you continue to get him that same average of targets? And in addition to that, get him different targets where he can potentially do something. And look, I obviously the return of Diontae Johnson can be huge, but it's not going to matter unless you start using him correctly, using him more than just these curls and comebacks. It is something that goes back to what we said coming out of last season and into this season here. You've got to give these guys more ability to run after the catch outside of just trying to throw the football up over the top of defenses here. And we have to see more of these slants, more of these digs, things where these guys can catch the football and run in space. I think the biggest chore where maybe the argument of not getting the football to George Pickens enough might come with the return of Diontae, because obviously you're going to try to get him his targets as well, too. Can you continue to get George 7 to 8 targets moving forward a game and potentially an additional type of target with him running out in space?
Well, I think Pittsburgh's done a good job of getting Pickens in space this year. His yak number is off the charts. I know that's partially influenced by the Browns game.
A couple of catches within there that he's run long on.
Yeah, well, that's kind of the point. It's what we wanted to see from him and from this offense. So he's doing those things that we hope that he and this offense would do. And with Diontae, we'll just have to see how they use him. He played, not even 3 full quarters of football, right. So it's hard to say and how much smarter they use him. I think he was certainly misused, miscast in his route tree last year. But I mean, you look at Pittsburgh's yak numbers overall. I don't know where they are exiting week number 6, but they're much improved compared to last year.
Yeah, but you got a couple of home run balls, though.
But that's like for the point. We wanted the home. We said
Sure.
the whole offseason was they needed to have yak plays and explosive plays and chunk plays.
Sure, but does it feel sustainable for the double and triple explosive touchdown?
I mean, there needs to be another element to it. You can't solely rely on that.
That's the element that I want.
Sure. But I mean, even if you look at Pickens, his overall yak, you probably remove some of those things. I mean, he was the NFL's worst yak receiver last year. And I think statistically, he was like a top 10 guy entering the week. So I can just see some improvement there. But there's certainly more work to be done. When Freiermuth gets back, he's got to get involved more. There's got to be more yak opportunities for him, maybe for Calvin Austin to do some more underneath stuff. I don't think Austin's been used underneath enough in this offense, Dave. He's kind of been just a vertical clear out guy. There's got to be maybe a bit more to do with him. Once Diontae comes back for this Rams game, Austin might play in the slot a bit more, work that area of the field a little more often, a little more screen game, maybe RPO game. That'll be good for him and good for the team yak.
Did we learn, if we learned anything since Diontae went down, did we learn that Calvin Austin probably not an ideal every down kind of X?
Yeah, the biggest issue with Austin is obviously the lack of size. I mean, the catch radius is just so limited with him. I mean, just the making those grabs outside his frame, you don't see it often. He had one nice sideline catch, I think, against Houston. That's one of the few times I've seen him in Pittsburgh. Granted, he missed his whole rookie year, but one of the few times I've seen him really make a catch that wasn't really between the 1 and the 9 on his jersey.
I think the best thing that this team can do with getting Diontae back is move these guys around.
Right. And I think the best thing, too, is that the heat will come off of Pickens, and he's going to be singled up more often. And when he's singled up, as we saw in the Ravens game, he gets the vertical game going, Pickett gets the back shoulder fade game going, and this offense in the pass game looks better.
Right. And I think you've got to, now that you're probably not nailing down Austin so much in the X, you got to try to find ways to get him moved around, the ball out in space to him. I
agree. And I think that's something we'll see more of with Johnson's return. I'm really excited that Diontae Johnson's coming back.
Well, I am if they use them and get them the ball out in space more.
Fair point.
But look, it's not going to hurt. It's just can they get the ball in the hands to these guys? And then in addition to that, back to the thing with Pickens is, can they continue to get him his 6 to 7 target average? Obviously, coverage and schemes going to play a role in that. But you would like to see him at least average, more than 5 targets a game moving forward.
Sure, I'm with you there. Some of this team has to possess the ball. They don't possess the ball enough, and that just limits the number of total targets and overall opportunities across the board. So that's something to work on. But obviously, if you get the ball in your playmakers' hands, you're gonna convert. You're gonna sustain drives. You're gonna possess the ball more. So they all kind of go hand in hand. My overall point was that, could you argue that Pickens should have a couple more targets? You could, and that's fine. And that's fair. You're always trying to get your top guys involved. But, if he had 45 targets versus 40 targets, we're talking about small things here that are not the issues, the core problems of why Pittsburgh's offense has struggled. Right.
And look, in addition to all those guys, with Pat Freiermuth hopefully getting healthy after the bye, you got to find a way to start getting him the ball, especially in like third down situations. And he has been targeted in the red zone and all like that. But between the 20s, this team needs to get down in the red zone more, period. If they're not going to score the 60, 70-yard touchdowns, they need to get down in the red zone more as well, too. They need to possess. They need to become possessed. You've got to see them because there's obviously several good byproducts of that as well too. Your defense is not on the field as much. That's another thing that's hurt this team. And all that, we could peel back this onion several layers in this conversation. You got to be able to run the football better. Running the football better on early downs will help you should help you possess the football. So just offense in general, you've got to see them be able to possess the football longer. And if you do that, you would hope that you're going to be able to move the football down the field and get in the red zone more. And then as Matt Canada likes to say, score more points.
Right. No, they do. They have to sustain drives. That's the reason why they have I think technically 7 red zone trips, but one was the Ravens game, just them on that last drive, just kneeling down and that whole thing. So really call it 6 true actual attempted red zone drives, and through 5 games, that is I believe it's the least in football.
Right.
All right, Dave, anything else you wanted to discuss or talk about today? Anything else that I may have missed?
What did it tell you about Mason Cole in the video you put up? Tell the people about that real quick.
Yeah, like I mentioned in our option year, bonus year, roster bonus conversation, that it's just not been good. And look at the Ravens game; it's emblematic of the entire season. The zone tracks have been poor. He's been beating pass protection too much, and you got Aaron Donald coming to town, or they're going to play Aaron Donald, I should say, on Sunday. And in Meyer's system, the center is typically more isolated. He's in more 1v1 battles because the guards tend to help the tackles more. Will they adjust that plan against Donald and the Rams? They probably would. They'd be smart to do so, but I can't explain what it is. But Cole has just been really poor from the get-go, from week 1. And it's been a big downgrade to where he was at last year. I charged him for 3 sacks this year. That's more than he gave up all last year. And 3 sacks for a center is a pretty high number. And we're in week 5 of this thing. So it's alarming across the board.
And you went into also, I think we talked about this recently. What's Kenny Pickett on pace to how many times get sacked?
47 sacks he's on pace to be taken down this year. I know there's a 17-game season, but that would be tied for the 3rd most in team history behind Big Ben. And Cliff Stout in 1983 got sacked 53 times, I think it was. And so 51, 53. So that was a terrible year for him. But yeah, it's happening too often, and there's multiple reasons for that. Some of that's on Pickett, some of that's on scheme, receivers, offensive line, obviously. But regardless of what the reasons are, it has to stop.
I agree. Let's see. Looking real quick at their red zone. Let's see. 7 total red zone opportunities and 2 conversions.
Right. Now, one of them, again, was that Ravens game, so you can call them 2 of 6. But whatever you want to call them, call it not enough.
And they still without a rushing touchdown.
Did the Vikings get a rushing touchdown this week? Were they playing?
They played the Bears, didn't they?
They did. Did they get a rushing touchdown? They were the only other team not to have one. They did not. And so they're now on pace to become one of the longest droughts without a rushing touchdown in NFL history.
All
right, Dave, let's get to some reader emails and close out today's show. And just a reminder, no live stream tonight. That's as scheduled, but that'll be next Monday after the Rams game.
All right, let's go to Christine Bond. If I recall correctly, during the second half of last year, Minkah was frequently in a robber role. Thus far this year, I do not believe he has been used in that role nearly like last year. Is that correct? And could that be a change we could see beginning with the Rams? Well, I think we've already talked a little bit about that, about him having to guard all these tight ends so much.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's game plan specific. I gave more grace in the Ravens game because they really matched Minkah up on Mark Andrews on almost every 3rd down situation. I don't have exact stats on, robber role overall. I mentioned on Friday's show that his box count rate was really high, much, much higher than it, had been last year. And so I don't love that overall. So I'd have to look at some of the data on that. But yeah, I don't know if Minkah has been utilized the best overall this season.
Didn't the last time that they played the Rams, he kind of robbed a little bit more and was cutting down and against Cup and wasn't that the game that I think didn't he have an interception and a fumble?
No, it was recovery? The fumble recovery for a touchdown. Yeah, where everyone kind of stopped and thought the play was dead. And Minkah
wasn't there a red zone opportunity though that he came down against Cup or something and cut?
Yeah, well, there was something on a crosser. I think he lit up Cup or something. Yeah, yeah, they're going to bracket the heck out of Cup, obviously. So you may see more of that this week. I'm sure they're going to have a plan. I mean, when they played Cup last, he literally did not catch a pass. He was targeted 4 times, 0 receptions. So they got, Nakua, who's playing really good ball for them, and Atwell's just tiny. They're Calvin Austin. So we'll see. But Cup is certainly the number 1 guy to take away.
Craig Sampson's got a rant here. Hi, guys. Great coverage. The Steelers have become unbearable to watch. Even when they win, it seems like it shouldn't have happened. feels like the last four years sometimes. He says people always ask about their identity. Their identity is being stuck in 1985. He says their identity is to pass rush and relying on TJ Watt to be an all-star every single game. It is completely unsustainable. I think the Steelers think that they are always the smartest people in the room, and maybe they were years ago, but the NFL has passed them by, whether it's play calling, signing free agents, or drafting. Legit question. Who was the last Steelers player other than TJ Watt that the Steelers drafted that was selected to the Pro Bowl and not as an alternate? He says, I couldn't even go back that far. And you had a conversation about what the Steelers need to do better in the offseason. He says, totally agree with Dave. Something needs to change. Just because we signed someone to more than a vet minimum doesn't mean it's a good player. Clearly, their drafted players aren't developing properly, or they don't know how to evaluate players, that they don't fit the scheme. Not sure. Look, we can take issue the way Joey Porter's been brought along and all, but hopefully that turns out to be the right way overall. So far, this draft class looks pretty good overall, especially with the game Broderick Jones had in his first NFL start. When Joey Porter's been out there, it's been fine. Keanu Benton's been fine. Herbig, what do you expect for a guy in the fourth outside linebacker role? I'm not overly concerned with what has or has not happened there. I was expecting Darnell Washington to be a little bit better as a blocker than he's been. Would you agree?
I thought he was going to be inconsistent. I thought he wasn't maybe quite as good or as ready as some people thought. So I'm not. It's about what I expected, to be honest with you. Okay,
I was wanting a little bit more, so we differ a little bit in that area. But they're still tied. There's still 12 games for him to develop in that area there. Spencer Anderson is just a backup, so anything that you get out of him moving forward is fine. And then obviously you lost Corey Trice Jr. To an injury. So I other than Joey Porter Jr. Maybe being on the field more so far, and obviously you could take issue with Broderick Jones only getting his first career start this past game. At least he is now in that role there. I think top to bottom, you have to be okay with what this rookie class has done so far, right? Based on what's been asked of them.
Sure, I'm happy with it. Really good question though on the last team or last player the Steelers have drafted who made the Pro Bowl not as an alternate besides TJ Watt. I'm trying to look through the list of names here. I think Diontae's made it as an alternate. Najee's made it as an alternate. I don't know though. That's a good question. Dave? Did Hargrave made it while in Philadelphia, not in Pittsburgh? Yeah, that's an interesting.
It's not question. Cam Hayward, is it? Can't be. No. What about Shazier?
Yeah, Shazier. He made Pro Bowls, right? Yeah, 2-time Pro Bowler there, but that's 2014. That's a decade ago. So over the last decade, the only 2 Pro Bowlers they've drafted have been Watt and Shazier.
I'm gonna have to pull this up real quick.
It was Bell in 13, so to go back 2013 to 2023. Now they've, Pro Bowl's not say all end all, and they've had some talented players, Juju and Sutton and Hargrave himself, and the alternates we just mentioned there in Johnson and Harris. So I've kind of defended their classes. Highsmith,
What about what Juju was an alternate the year he went, right?
I don't remember, but probably just given how competitive.
And Connor, same with Connor, right?
I don't know about James Conner if he was an alt. He may have been. I honestly do not remember alternates versus first original ballots. But it's a valid question.
Yeah. Looking through this list real quick here. Yeah. Let's see. Going back, you mentioned Bell 2013, but Shazier was drafted in 2014. Yeah. Look, they. Yeah, long story short, the emailer makes a good point.
Right. But again, I mean, Alex Highsmith, I think, had a Pro Bowl season last year, but just given the competition at the edge spot, TJ Watt should not have made the Pro Bowl over Alex Highsmith last year. So there is some of that to consider as well. But the point overall is the point is taken.
Okay, let's see. Going through this, Hasm writes in, Dave and Alex, two things I wanted to run past you in defense of Kenny Pickett. We played 3 very tough defenses. He didn't play great, but he looks fine compared to how other quarterbacks did against the same teams. Burrow versus the Browns and Baltimore, Purdy against Cleveland. Look, say what you will about the 49ers. They didn't have McCaffrey and Debo, and I didn't think who's their other wide receiver over there? Didn't have the best
Ayuk.
game. Ayuk had seemed like a couple of drops in that game. And that's his number one point, was comparing how some other quarterbacks did, like Burrow against Cleveland and Baltimore, and Purdy against Cleveland. He says it seems like Kenny has a clutch gene, although it's a very small sample size. As a fan, though, I feel comfortable with Kenny has the ball late in tight games. Assuming he has a clutch gene, can you think of quarterbacks in NFL history that had a clutch gene but were mediocre in a lot of other circumstances? Two names he says comes to mind: Jim Harbaugh and Eli Manning. Conversely, I've seen quarterbacks without the clutch gene but were otherwise solid. Matt Hasselbeck, Kirk Cousins. Boy, he's going down rabbit holes here. I guess my point is I think it's more encouraging to have a guy with a clutch gene than without, because playoff games and Super Bowls are won by quarterbacks that can make throws when the stakes are highest. He says, I feel like Kenny just needs to get more consistent during games, not just in clutch. I mean, that's what you want to see, right? Is the time other than 4 minutes left in the game.
Sure. Just to interrupt here briefly, Dave, I got some Steelers news coming in right now. The Steelers announcing that wide receiver Diontae Johnson and running back Anthony McFarland have returned to practice today. They remain on the reserved injured list, but their 21-day windows have officially opened up. So we knew Diontae was going to be one of those guys. Good to see McFarland join him.
Absolutely. And now we wait until Saturday to see if those guys are moved to the active 53-man roster there. Look,
Johnson should be moved, right?
Yeah.
McFarland we'll see, but Johnson should be.
Yeah. And then we'll see the corresponding off all that. Mm-hmm. We had that conversation and all. What do you think about his argument about Kenny and the clutch gene?
Yeah, I mean, it's, does it exist? I mean, we can debate about that. I think Bill Simmons made the comparison to Eli Manning to Pickett. I don't know if that was a compliment or not. I'm still trying to figure out where Simmons was coming in on that. But if Pickett can win 2 Super Bowls, I'll take that every day of the week. I guess overall, if you'd rather have something, you'd rather have the guy have that quote unquote clutch gene or just clutch nature in him. But I don't spend a lot of time thinking about that, and you got to do a lot of work to get to that point to be in those playoff type moments.
Right.
So I don't have a lot of thoughts there, I guess. But Good angle, good thought.
All right, let me get this tweeted out real quick on those guys, on Johnson and McFarland. That's obviously good news. Okay, back to the email machine. Janae, as a longtime listener, thanks so much for your work and amazing podcast. Thank you for the survey to provide feedback on the website. Really appreciate the opportunity to do that. Question: will you please explain EPA metrics like EPA per play? How is this calculated and determined, especially with an offense that has low expectations? How do EPA metrics impact my stat, adjusted net yards per passing attempt? EPA really at this point, adjusted net yards per passing attempt is, even though it's kind of an advanced stat, it's become kind of a little bit more on the archaic side, if you will, overall, because of more like EPA metrics and all like that. And you could have conversations on EPA and what it is and how it's determined. The best way to describe that is expected points added, and it's a measure of success, which is defined. And I'm giving you the loose explanation from Pro Football Focus, which divides the value we each play. Basically, each and every play has expected points based on down, distance, score, game, and all like that. And the impact of that play versus what it provides sets up the next play, yada, yada, plays into the expected points added metric. It is a very intense, yet it's very effective because you can isolate not only the team offense and defense, and really special teams for that matter, but you can isolate it for a play or a player on top of it. So once again, this is all calculated off of down, distance, everything related to the play of what the expected points for scoring would be on that particular play. To try to sum it up in 15 minutes is next to impossible to do, but there is great reading about this on Pro Football Focus, Pro Football Reference, really all over the internet as far as expected points added.
You explained it better than I ever could, Dave. So thank you for taking the baton on that one. So I echo what Dave has to say.
Look, it is a very effective way at looking once again at units, teams, and individual players. And in fact, a lot of the advanced graphs and metrics that you see out there nowadays revolve a lot around, mostly around expected points added. I love it. It's just it's hard to have conversations about it in a podcast other than surface level for teams, although you can get it. You can go down rabbit holes with this thing on individual players. I love it. It's hard to have conversations about it, especially when you have people that are listeners and end users that are still getting into trying to understand what it is.
Right. It's harder and not as commonplace to talk about some of these advanced analytics as it is baseball, for example, but it's becoming certainly more and more part of the lexicon. And I think you explained it as well as you could in an audio format like this, Dave.
I think the best thing, if you are into this, rbsdm.com is at least one site, and I think obviously Next Gen Stats does this to some degree as well too. You can look at, and Pro Football Reference obviously does this by play as well too. If you want to look at the play by play and really just any overall stats of teams or players as well too. Get into it though, and you can look at, as games go along, what the expected points added is and all like that. It's here to stay. I'll tell you that. It's a measurement that's not going anywhere. And I think we will be able to, as this becomes more widely accepted, which it is pretty much with us nerds, and at this point, it will become more of a talked about measurement moving forward.
And we're seeing that with that and different things. We see the chartings from PFF and some of the other software that's out there to get some of these nitty gritty numbers on, perfectly covered plays and stuff like that. You are seeing a push in that advanced analytics side of the NFL.
Right.
All right, Dave.
Let's see if I can get maybe one more other part of the question here. How do we get so bamboozled with this offense after the preseason? What did we miss? Did we see enough snaps to see the struggles? Yeah, look, I shame on me too. I'm still kicking myself for getting, and I know better than that. I've done this long enough to not get caught up in the preseason. We didn't see a lot of snaps from this offense overall. When you look at it at its core, and the fact that the genericness of preseason and defenses and the quality of competition out there needs to be taken into account when it comes to all that as well too. So you would like to see this offense specifically get more to anywhere closer to the way they played in those handful of snaps during the preseason.
Yeah, for sure. It's hard to explain. I don't know
if it's so much what did we miss as far as did we apply too much value? Some of us apply too much value to it.
Yeah, that's probably a fairer way to assess that. It wasn't that you missed something. There really wasn't anything to miss. It was just, do you overvalue the summer play too much? So that's probably the fairer critique than missing something.
With the fungibility of the running back, do you expect any current or recently retired running backs to make the Hall of Fame? Who do you expect to be the next Hall of Famer out of, say, like Adrian Peterson, Marshawn Lynch, Frank Gore, Fred Taylor, Eddie George, Ricky Waters is the names listed here? That's a great question there. Man, Frank Gore is always going to be in that conversation because of the longevity of his career. Adrian Peterson the same way, Fred Taylor, Eddie George. That's a great question. I haven't really thought about who I expect the next Hall of Famer out of that bunch to be.
Should be AP. I think he has the easiest case and maybe a first ballot dude. Gore's got a good shot. The others, I don't know. And then in terms of current running backs, it's hard to find a name. Derrick Henry, maybe, but I'm not sure if he quite gets there. It's hard to pick somebody.
Right. All right. Thanks for the questions, Janae. Let's see if we can grab one more here. Dave and Alex, love the show. In the Friday podcast, you wondered why they don't run the pistol. It's because that puts the running back another 3 yards back in the backfield. They are already having a hard time making it back to the line of scrimmage clean. The Steelers have 2 good receiving running backs. Why do we think they can't successfully run screens more often? Jay from Buffalo. Well, look, we're not saying put them back in the pistol 20 times a game.
Sure.
What is a positive aspect? What is a positive impact of the pistol?
The things we talked about Friday, where it's more downhill run action. You don't tip your hand on what side you're running to. You can probably more effectively run play action than you can at a shotgun. So you get, the benefits, kind of a best of both worlds of under center versus being in traditional shotgun with the running back sidecar.
Why don't you think this team can't successfully run screens more often?
Well, it's more than just the running back. Usually the running back is kind of the last piece to a successful screen. The quarterback's got to sell it. He can't be staring down the back the whole way. The line has to be able to sell the initial drop back, and then, time when they pull and get out into space and find guys and block it up well. And everyone's got to be on the same track out there in space, which can be tricky. You got to have the right athletes to do that. So really the running back hand component, how good of a receiving back somebody is kind of the last thing on the list of what makes a successful screen team.
Agreed. Would like to see them try to execute a few of those moving forward here, especially when you've got 2 guys out of the backfield, such as Najee and Warren, who have shown they can catch the football out of the backfield.
Sure. It's been a frustrating 5 years for the lack of the screen game.
All right. What are we, an hour and a half here?
Yeah, I made it pretty long today, so we should probably wrap things up.
All right. We will be back on Wednesday and talking about the Mike Tomlin press conference on Tuesday and whatever else has happened since then. And you can follow me on Twitter at Steelers Depot. Follow Alex on Twitter at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you like what we do and want to donate to the cause, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the donate button or find the ad-free version of the site, whether it be desktop or mobile. Email all questions to theterriblepodcast@gmail.com as stated. And until Wednesday, as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.